Well, I want to welcome everyone to the Campfire. I'm your host, Mike McDonell, and today we are talking about something that we don't always engage in, and that is the role of elders. We live in this time when answers are a search away and advice often comes from algorithms. But what happens when we slow down long enough to listen to someone who has already lived that arc? What happens when we seek the answers and wisdom from our elders? Bo Byron started Byron Gymnastics over 50 years ago. He is nationally known for his work in the gymnastics and youth development world. He's coached thousands of kids, raised his own family, and he now sits in the Grandparent Seat. He is also, full disclosure, my father-in-law. And I must really like the guy to give him so much praise and bring him into this show. But I truly and sincerely do. In recent years, Parkinson's has also changed the pace of his life. And with that, his perspective. This conversation is about what kids and parents can gain when we lean into generational wisdom. Bo, I'm super happy to have you today. How are you doing?
Mike, I'm doing great. Nice to talk to you. Nice for those little tidbits of approval.
Not a problem, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the effort and getting on with us. And I want to dive right into everything and get going. And Bo, I talked about you having Parkinson's. And let's start out with that. I know that's a little personal, but how has being diagnosed with Parkinson's changed the way that you see the world?
I see the world much more slowly. I move much more slowly. And I appreciate things so much more.
So expand on that a little bit for me, because that really is interesting. You think 1 out of 4 people have a family member that has some form of dementia, right? And I don't think we talk enough about that. And I don't think that here's our conversation. But having Parkinson's, and you just talked about that a little bit, it changes one's perspective, right? Obviously, you said it slows you down. With regards to your family, how does that change how you view your grandkids?
Pause for a second. We'll edit this. When I say slow me down, that means I have more time to think, more times to look, more times when I can't join the activities. So it gives you reflection time to think about what's really important and what's not important. And grandkids are really one of the most important things at my age in life.
Well, you have a lot of grandkids to be thankful for. I know that for a fact.
12 to be exact.
How does that change the way you show up for your grandkids?
Well, once you become disabled or partially disabled, transportation is difficult. You've got to plan ahead. You don't just go out and jump in the truck and head to the event. I feel it's very important to spend your time that you have available with your grandchildren, both as a role model and as someone who can watch for problems, and as a person who is in the background, always watching. That being said, it's a delight to watch your children in athletic events, educational events, and holiday events.
It's great. Plenty of those, I think, that you could partake in with as many grandkids as you have. One of the things that we talk about on this show is how kids are shaped by the adults around them. And you've lived this from several seats, right? You have a unique perspective, right? You've lived it obviously as a parent, but you've also lived it as a coach, right? A business owner for 50 years, right? And now as a grandparent. And from where you sit today, what do you think kids need most from us?
To distill it down to a 4-letter word, love. To elaborate, they need attention, and they need the right kind of attention, the type of attention that makes them feel good about themselves so they can feel good about what they do in the world.
Right. Absolutely. I think about all the things that you've done over the course of your life, right? And how many kids probably unrelated to you probably think of you as a grandfather figure, whether that's having coached them in gymnastics or mentored them over the course of so many years. When you think about your own particular childhood compared to those kids maybe today, what feels most different about that? And I'm talking about both the positive and the negative with regards to that.
Well, I'll start with the negative first. When I was a young child, I was much more free than children are today. We would hop on our bicycle, head to the bayou to catch minnows. Mother would have no idea where I was, but I just needed to be home by the time the street lights are on. And that's actually a fact, although it's become quite an adage that people use. Nowadays, we don't have that type of freedom. Second thing we had was we didn't have a lot of toys. We didn't have a lot of things to be creative about, so we had to be creative about smaller and fewer things and more athletic things. The third thing, there's too much time right now spent on keyboard development. It's a two-edged sword. We want our children to grow up to be cognizant and intelligently knowledgeable of the world of computers, etc. Back then, we had none of that. So we learned our creativity in different ways.
You had a box and a stick, right?
Well, it was a little bit more than that. I
Sort of had to figure things out, right? Well, one of the things I think is really interesting, and one of the things I was really fascinated about having you on the show today was you have a unique perspective, right? For 50 years, you ran this institution that is called Byron Gymnastics, right? And you mentored, you coached thousands of kids over the course of those years. But you've also been the parent, you've been the grandparent, right? And I think because of all those, you just have a unique outlook on life. And so one of the things that we talk about on the show, how kids are shaped by the adults around them, right? When you think about your childhood compared to kids today, what feels most different, both the good and the bad, between when you were a kid and what you see going on in 2026?
When I was a kid, there was a lot more freedom. I could be gone for the whole day on my bicycle. Mother would not know where I was. I just had to be back by dark. Today's children, most do not have that advantage. Right. So there was a sense of individuality and being able to do your own thing at a younger age, perhaps. Yeah. Secondly, I did not have the exposure to all the electronic stuff we have today. So I had more time to be creative with simpler things, bicycles, rides, snowball fights. I spent much more time outdoors than children today. Even television, back then we only had 3 channels if we had a TV. When I was really young, only my grandparents had a TV, so I only saw TV, Mickey Mouse Club, when I was at the grandparents'.
Right. Something really resonates with me right there, and it's not really the specifics, but it's that lack of freedom. I guarantee you probably didn't have what the term play date was probably not in the vernacular when you were a child, right? You didn't have to organize play, which is an oxymoron in and of itself, right? Play just happened effortlessly, right? It was always there. You took off outside and played. I don't think your parents probably worried as much where you were and what you were doing as long as you came back at a certain time or made it by dinner or something like that. And I think that, gosh, man, that sense of adventure and that sense of freedom instills a sense of independence in kids that gives them confidence, grit, that sense of making independent decisions on one's own terms, right? All sort of the things I feel like that are lacking today, right, with kids.
I see that in my own grandkids today and my children as well, that the way they have been raised has tried to expound on and push that narrative of they have to become responsible for their actions.
I want to dive a little bit more into in one of the pieces that you talked about. And you talked about electronics, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, we all rely heavily on technology now for answers or not answers or whatever we're using it for. What do you think families should hold on to even as the world speeds up and that ship has sailed? Technology is a part of our life. We're going to be using computers and handheld devices and whatever else. But giving advice to parents in a world like that, what do you think that those parents need to hold on to in helping raise their kids?
I think the electronics need to become a part of their life, but not the main part of their lives.
Right.
Like anything else, I think it should be structured. Right. You may do this and that under parents' control, but not all day long sitting behind the keyboard while other people are outside playing and enjoying things.
Totally.
In other words, I'm aware of one of my grandchildren, or several of them, whose parents have given them a time limit. They can be on the keyboard half hour a night, unless it's directly for research. The other thing I would do, our computers was called Collier's Encyclopedia. That's all we had. What are those? You find them in the garage sales now.
That's right. Holding down forts maybe for blankets or something like that, right?
Correct.
How can parents help their kids value real voices and real stories? And I guess where I'm going with that is, right, I think so much of the communication that our kids get today is not through a human voice, right? It's through an Instagram feed, or it's through TikTok, not real voices, right? And I think that maybe our kids lack in some of those real voices and real stories, not the digital ones. How can parents help their kids make sure they don't lose those, right? In that touch with reality. And how would you suggest they capture that for their family?
In a broad spectrum opportunity, take your children and expose them to summer camps, vacation time. On vacation time, you can expose them to different types of cultures, architectures. Pause for a second, let me catch my voice.
Sure.
That they can learn their stories through other methods than actually watching Instagram.
One of the things, and you just made me think of this, I saw this the other night, right? We're at a restaurant, my family, and we're sitting there, and we notice a table, and there had to be about 8 or 10 family members at this table. But there was probably 3 generations at that table, parents and then young children. And the thing that struck me the most was that the children all had a little iPad that was sitting there, and they were dialed into their iPad while they had this incredible opportunity to have grandparents tell them stories about their childhood, to create conversation around any number of topics, right? But those parents chose not to take that opportunity. I think you were talking about opportunity a second ago, right? Using
Correct.
those opportunities when you have family members like yourself, like a grandparent, to share those stories and talk about that. That's got to be so invaluable for kids, right? But I think so many parents choose just to have their kids tune out from those opportunities. And I think it's kind of tragic in a way, right?
That becomes the role model issue. You are the role model to your child.
Right.
Most people don't realize as a child between the ages of 0 and probably 5 or 6, brain operates differently. It's usually in the theta wavelength range, and they're nothing but tape recorders. Everything the mother does, the father does, or the gym teacher, whatever, is recorded, but it's not judged. So under those circumstances, if the parents are doing things that they don't want their children to do, well, they're fostering that behavior with their children. For example, if mommy and daddy are having a screaming match, child hears that. If one, and I don't want to go into facts, but there's a number of behaviors that the parents do themselves that they don't want the children to do.
Right.
Now, your example of the table sitting around is exactly that part. There are a bunch of people sitting around a table, and what are they doing? They're on their cell phones. And if they're on their cell phones, what are we teaching our children?
Right. Yeah, we can talk all we want about how we want our kids to act and behave. If we don't set an example first and be that model for them and their behavior that we want, it's kind of futile at the end of the day, right? Kids are smart. They get it. I want to switch things back to coaching, right? You're a different kind of granddad, right? And a parent,
Yes.
right? You also had this other job that involved thousands of kids over 50 years. Given that experience and that time, right? And looking across that vast landscape of opportunities that you spent coaching and mentoring kids, what have kids always needed, no matter the decade, no matter if it was the late 60s or the 70s or the 2000s right now? What has been consistent since your time with kids that they've always needed that's not gone away?
Consistency and honesty. Now, when you talk about coaching, first of all, your child is being coached by somebody else. It becomes a tripartite foundation. There are 3 things involved in coaching or an athletic event. There's the child, there's the parent, and there's the coach. We have to make sure that everybody knows their role and doesn't move into somebody else's role. One of the biggest problems I've seen in the years in terms of coaching is the parent who wants to be the coach. Now, I learned that lesson the hard way. One of my sons, my youngest son actually, was an ice hockey player. So was my oldest, but the youngest one, I took him to his first ice hockey practice. And when we got in the car driving home, I don't remember his exact words, but he said, well, pause for a second. All right, let me come back.
Sure, you got it.
And so mother and I were sitting in the stands watching the coaches work with my kid as well as the other. And we happened to have gotten a great coach. But anyway, when we got in the car, I said, Patrick, let me tell you what you need to do. Oops, you have to take the name out. I said, son, let me tell you what you need to do. You need to do this. You need to cross your legs. And he said, Dad, You're not my coach. That was a lifetime learning lesson. It wasn't you, Mike, don't worry. But when you ask the question about what was most thing is important when you're coaching a child is making sure that what you're teaching is in small enough bites that it can be eaten by the child.
Right.
Number two, remembering that you're working on more than just doing a skill. Confidence, you're working on a child's, let me see how I want to say this, hold on.
Maybe their character.
Yep,
Yeah.
child character. And if you're going to push them, you have to push them very wisely.
Right.
Never give them more than they can handle.
Do you think the role of coaches is as important today as it was back in the day when you were coaching? Yeah. And why is that? I want to drill into that a little bit more, right? Why is having a coach / mentor / teacher so important to the growth and the maturation of a kid outside of his parents?
Well, it's the same thing we know that when your child reaches driving age, you don't teach your child how to drive. You hire some professional to do it.
Right.
And the reason is there are strings attached with a father and a son, or a mother and a daughter, or mother or son, father, daughter. There's always strings attached. A coach can be an outside person that if he or she does it well and has the best interest of the child at heart, becomes more of a situation where the child can have someone else that can get a view of what their actual performance is.
Right. Sure.
Well, your mother always thinks you did a great job. The secret from a coaching point of view is when you're critiquing a child
Yes.
or training them in a skill, it's always got to be the same thing. Now, another story from an old coach. In gymnastics, there's a balance beam, which is about 1 minute and 20 seconds, depending on what year it is, routine. One of my girls, one time, I was on the girls' team, was working the balance beam in a competition, and she fell, and then she fell some more, probably 5 or 6 falls before she exited the routine. As she was standing there crying, leaving the beam, her father yelled at her, "You didn't even want to try to stay on, did you?" Now think about this. She just had an earth-shattering situation in front of her parents and other friends, and her father's blaming her.
Right.
That is not the way to have your child in athletics. As a coach, I would address that completely differently. You're a great kid. You tried as hard as you could, but we can do these things to improve, and just let it go from there. Don't say another word about it.
I think you bring up a really important point, and I think it's one of the reasons coaches are so needed, and I think it has to do with success and failure. And I'm going to ask you this question first before I comment on it, but do you think it's more important for kids to learn from their failures or
learn from their failures? Well,
it's hard for that parent whose child never fails in their mind, right, to accept that one though, isn't it?
It is hard for that, and it's hard for the child who's extremely talented and successful all the time to realize how hard he or she needs to work. At some point in time in their career, it's going to get tough.
Having lived a couple more decades than maybe I have, would you say that your own life is a testament to that with regards to successes and failures? Have you learned more in your life through your failures or successes?
I think it's about an even split. I've certainly had a lot of failures.
Right.
When a child fails at something, if you as a coach or a parent can turn it into a learning experience, which does not say anything about the child's value, a child's worth, or a child's attitude. It says about this is the way we fix this issue, or this is the way we change what we're doing to have a better outcome. You know, again, one of the most important things to me in all the years I've been teaching is to never shame a child.
Right.
Never tell a child you're a bad kid because you did this. It's always that was a bad choice.
Sure.
And let me explain very quietly, without any anger, why that was a bad choice and what you should have done for a better outcome.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the failure success thing, I think so many parents teach their kids not to fail, but life is an inevitable path of failures, whether it's now or whether it's tomorrow. Teaching a child that failure is part of growth and accepting that man, it just sets them on a trajectory to become so much more successful, which is what you want to do in the first place with a kid, right? Is you want them to be successful. And I think one of the greatest obstacles to success is understanding that success is part of that path. It's ingrained in it. And to embrace that failure is to give every kid the best opportunity to move forward, to be that successful and happy person, right, in life, right?
I completely agree with that. And the other thing is, your children need to understand that life is not a bed of roses. There will always be challenges.
Right.
It's not the factor that you have a challenge, it's how you meet that challenge that ultimately determines what kind of character you have. That's another word we haven't talked about yet, is character. You want your children to have character.
Right.
Character means logically handling your emotions, keeping things in check, and always knowing where you need to go, and always remembering that you're part of a culture and a civilization, that every person is important.
Yes. Yep.
And
Yeah, for sure. Let me do that. And Bo, I think one of the things that, as you're talking about that building of character, as you're talking about raising your own kids to understand failure and successes, it brings to mind your legacy, right? You talk about character, Bo, and you talk about the importance of learning how to deal with failures and successes, right? I think a great example of that is how you passed on Byron Gymnastics, right? Your company to your kids, right? To Patrick in particular, who's your son, right? And he's sort of carrying on that legacy. Can you talk a little bit about that as well, too? Because as a parent, right, that's got to make you feel pretty proud, right? That after 50 years of creating this institution, right, that continues on with one of your own kids. If you could speak to that, I'd love to hear that.
of course, I can speak to it. Of course, you left yourself out, because you and KidVenture are another company that I feel like has what children need in the world today, which is good people with a good program that always considers the value of the child first and care of the child. Anyway, getting back to my family, I built a 50-year legacy of taking care of children, so that one of my mantras was, the last time they walk out of this building, they'll be better human beings than the first time they walked in. I just feel very fortunate that one of my children decided that he would carry the legacy on in the same manner that you've carried a legacy of treating children on with KidVenture. He would do it with our Mama and Papa's program. And to be honest with you, well, I have to trim this a little bit here. He was well trained by Mike, working for a time in Mike's program, and then he just decided to do some gymnastics work, came and started being a teacher and worked his way through. And finally, one day, he just looked at me and he said, Dad, I think I'm ready to run this by myself. And that's when I backed off, and ultimately, it's a family legacy. We gave him the company. Now, I will tell you that both Mike's KidVenture and Patrick's renamed Byron Youth Sports Center, between them, are serving easily 50 to 75,000 children a year, and they're doing it in the right way.
Well, we had a good mentor there back in the day there, Bo. And that's really what it's about. At KidVenture, we talk about things in terms of outcomes, right? We don't necessarily run camp for camp's sake. We run camp because we purposely create an opportunity for outcomes. I'm less concerned with what happens in the moment at camp. Yes, it needs to be safe. Yes, it needs to be fun. Yes, it needs to be entertaining. But it needs to be something that's done that creates an outcome for a kid, right? You're not going to go to camp forever, right? You're not going to go to gymnastics class forever. When you walk out that door at the end of the class, end of the day, the end of the year, when you graduate from the program, you hope that those kids' time with you served a greater purpose. And that's to help create a more confident person, a more kind person, someone who values teamwork, hard work, right? Grit, perseverance, all those things that we talk about when we talk about character, right? And I think at the end of the day, you and I have been aligned in terms of those outcomes and what our purpose has been for a very long time, right?
In sync. I'll give you a little side story. One day, I was standing near the door when one mom was coming in with the child and the other mom was going out.
Yep.
Mom was going out, child was crying. Mother going in says, did she get hurt today? I said, no, she doesn't want to leave.
That's when you did a good job.
As long as we're talking about this real quickly, KidVenture summer camp program does what we were talking about earlier between historical and contemporary raising of children. They need to get away from their parents. They need to be in situations with other children, learning, having fun, developing. That's just a unique opportunity for parents to get someone who's really good to help them broaden their child into a better human being.
Takes a village. I heard that once before. I want to shift gears a little bit away from coach for 50 years, back to the grandparent hat, if you will. Because a lot of the people who watch the podcast are parents, right? They're not necessarily grandparents, right? So I think it's a unique opportunity to dive into this a little bit more. In your opinion, what's different about being a grandparent instead of being a parent?
It's not your child, grandchild, number one.
You get to say, I'm done at the end of the day. Take them back, right?
Number two, yes. Once they go out and the door closes, it gets real quiet in the house again. Number two.
Right.
Number three, when I was a parent, I really thought I was much better than my grandparents. And number three, you have to realize that if daddy says the child needs to go to bed at 8 o'clock, grandpa better not come and make it 9. So there's a balancing act there between not disciplining the children necessarily, but a balance between just everyday living when the child's there versus not there. Now, the other thing is, and we reflected on this earlier, you have a lot more time to think. And in that thinking, you want every time you and their grandchildren are together with their grandparents, you want to make sure the opportunity is well spent. So don't get on your cell phone while you're with your grandkids.
Right. Do you feel more patient as a grandparent than you did as a parent, Bo?
Oh, tons more, for many reasons. A broader base of experiences from which to draw. So.
Sure. Maybe you have more time to think things through too. Think things aren't coming at you a million miles an hour as a parent with kids and that kind of thing like that. You could be more mindful in the moment about what you say and how you act and what you do around those grandkids, maybe?
Yes, gives you time to philosophize.
Sure.
It also gives you time to appreciate the variety.
Yes.
Mom and I have 12 grandkids, 4 of whom are yours. And it's just a delight on how each one is a different individual with different strengths and qualities and different issues. And the other thing you do as a grand is you sometimes subtly help a little bit, either as a role model,
right,
or as a idea. Hey guys, let's do this, let's do that. And the other thing is the grandparent also should be available if possible.
Right.
If you don't live in Alaska, should be available to help the parents when things really get tough. Pick the kid up at school for them, things that you enjoy doing as a grandparent. Parents have more flexibility and time to do some other things with other children.
Do you think about those 14 grandchildren and how they perceive you with Parkinson's? And what do you hope that they learn about you and about life through you struggling with Parkinson's, Bo?
That's an excellent question, Mike. Yes, life is not a bed of roses, as I said that earlier. There are medical issues and diseases that affect us as human beings. Nobody gets a free ride. Everybody has a little bit of something they have to deal with. I think that the best thing you can do for your grandchildren when dealing with a disease like this is approaching it honestly and approaching it, how do I say this? Approaching it honestly and approaching it as part of your lives. My grandkids are very cognizant of the fact that I have Parkinson's and that I have movement restraint. And because of that, it becomes a reality of life that maybe I can't do something with them, but whenever it is possible, we do it together. And of course, for Christmas, they gave me the awesome grandparent.
There you go. I think as hard as Parkinson's is, Bo, and I'm not in your shoes, what a unique opportunity you have to demonstrate bravery and courage and honesty through a struggle in life. Because whether it's Parkinson's or it's cancer or it's anything, a myriad of challenges that are going to happen to those grandkids as they grow up and move on in life, what a unique opportunity to demonstrate to them how to navigate those challenges, in your case, Parkinson's, no matter what that challenge is. And in a weird way, that's a blessing for them, right?
Yes, it is. That's an excellent point. And it makes them realize and look at people as individuals who have different needs. I can assure you, my grandkids, some of whom are yours, never fail to open a door when it's in front of me or help me sit down or help me get up.
Yep.
And it's just a part of life.
It is.
And now, that also puts a big responsibility on me that I must not complain about the way the cards have been dealt in my life. We all have a different hand that's been dealt to us. The secret of life is not to complain. The secret of life is to quietly do everything you can do to be as helpful as you can be. And if you can't make a baseball game one time because you're ill, then you can't make the baseball game. But when you can, be there, be attentive.
What do you say, Bo, what do you say to parents who want to shield their kids from the realities like Parkinson's disease or cancer or any one of many things that they might want to shield their kids from? What would be your advice to those parents, Bo?
You don't shield them. You make sure that they get the age-appropriate, proper introduction to the situation. 5 or 6 year olds might have one time you can talk to them about it one way or another. But one of my greatest joys is when my grandkids hit high school age. Then they're smart enough to be able to talk to them about philosophy of life, handling challenges, take what you've got and run with it the best possible, have respect for other people and their challenges, which may be different than yours. Take time to spend time with people that are important in your family life.
Amen. The other thing too, I think, Bo, that I think is going to be a lasting reward for those kids is, and I think having older folks around who maybe need more help physically gives you an opportunity to help our elders, right? And I think that instills a sense of respect. I think in our country, I think there are other countries like Japan where respect for elders takes on a much more important status. I think in America, I think we tend to fail a little bit there in that arena, not really respecting our elders, not giving them the credence that they deserve for being wise and having lived longer, right? And I think in your case, you've got grandkids that are helping with you. And I think that's a lasting lesson that will hopefully carry on to me when I need that same help, right? So, Bo, I've completely enjoyed this conversation, by the way, and it was more than what I expected, to be honest with you, and I want to thank you for doing that. But I've got a list of 10 questions. We're going to hit you up here and draw that wisdom out of your noggin, if you don't mind. The first is, I need one word that describes what kids need most today.
Love.
One thing you wish you worried less about as a young parent.
Being perfect.
What has Parkinson's taught you?
Patience.
What builds character faster, success or failure?
Both. Evenly.
If every parent did one thing consistently, what should it be?
Attention to their child.
What's more powerful, Bo, being right or
being present?
One trait you hope your grandkids carry into adulthood.
Caring for
What
others.
slows a child down in the best possible way?
Role modeling.
When kids look back on their childhood, what do you hope they remember most?
My philosophy.
And finish this sentence for me, Bo. At the end of the day, what really matters is
family.
How did I know you were going to say that? Bo, I really appreciate you being on with us today around the campfire. It means a lot to me personally, and I know it probably means a lot to those viewers who are watching this. You've led an amazing life, a lot of adventure, right? You've got a lot of stories that I've probably heard or might hear again. Who knows? I enjoy my conversation sitting on the back patio with you at the apartment, and I've enjoyed my conversation with you today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for making time and for coming on board and being so candid and vulnerable and honest with your conversation. It means a lot to me.
Mike, I appreciate that, and I will say this in passing and finishing up this interview. My oldest daughter, Peggy, I could not have asked for a better son-in-law than you, Mike McDonell, so that is greatly appreciated as time goes on.
Shucks. Thanks, Bo. I'll keep you as an in-law. I won't talk bad about you behind your back anymore. Damn it.
So much for Christmas presents.
Right. Thank you, Bo. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Mike. Great opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You bet. You know, one thing that stands out in this conversation is that parenting doesn't just happen in one season of life. It stretches across generations. And Bo, your story reminds us that wisdom doesn't come from speed. It comes from time, from experience, from showing up again and again, even when life changes the pace or presents you with a unique set of challenges. As parents, we don't have every answer, but we can choose who we listen to. We can choose to value the voices that have walked ahead of us, and we can invite our kids to do the same. So thanks for sitting with me around the campfire today. Really appreciate it. If you missed our last episode, we had a fascinating discussion with Justin Marler on raising connection, real bonds for kids in a distracted world. Former monk, incredible dad with kids. Please tune in, check it out, and we'll see you next time around the campfire.